Well, hello, everybody. We are back with another new episode. I am so blessed and happy to have another friend and colleague join us today. Welcome to Digital Health News. My name is Seppi. I am your host today. I am joined with a friend and colleague and someone I truly respect, and I've had the privilege to get to know a little bit more in the last year and didn't even know he worked where I worked, and we kind of bumped into each other a little bit more at at HIMSS 25 and got to know each other, and he thought he could say hi and get away from me, and he learned that was not the case. Welcome, Russ. How are you today?
I am great, Seppi. Thank you for the opportunity and invitation to come hang out with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Tell us a little bit more about you. Introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, please.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with a short story, and you can ask me if you want me to go longer. But
Okay.
I work at Piedmont Healthcare in Atlanta, Georgia. Piedmont is a hospital system. We own and manage 27 hospitals around the state of Georgia, including all their supporting clinics and services. And so I'm at the System Support Center in a function called business intelligence. At least that's what we call it. To people outside of our world, I typically tell people we're the data team
Mhm.
because we do pretty much all things data. If you put a verb or an adjective in front of or behind data, that's going to be us. So, data and analytics, data quality, data strategy, any of those that kind of falls through us. And my role specifically is I lead project delivery for any of our new data products. And primarily that's kind of a project management kind of role. I lead other leaders who lead projects. And then another significant chunk of my time is spent just making sure we have the right people on our team. So all of the hiring, I lead that process. And then in the rare times when we have to do, like when somebody has to leave the team, I also take care of that as well.
Yeah, yeah. You have an amazing team. I've interacted with them here and there and had the opportunity to reach out to you a couple of times. We had something go wrong, not wrong, something just needed attention. And I was like, oh, I know who to call now. So you were able to kind of lead us. So I failed to kind of mention our topic of conversation, the scripted component of it, and then hopefully wherever our conversation goes. But you're here, and what we're focusing on is really leading beyond the technology,
Mhm.
and your focus and your leadership style really resonates and demonstrates building teams, trust, and bringing along with that naturally innovation. And to your point, it's not something you always innovation is not something you can make happen, but
Yeah.
when you build that right team in that atmosphere environment, it will naturally evolve. And again, as I've mentioned to you a couple of times, and I really believe it. You that is who you are, and you
Thank
bring
you.
that forth. So let's start talking about leadership. How do you lead these technical team members effectively when you might not always be the expert on all
Mhm.
aspects of the technology? Obviously, you have that foundation, but your team members come with different levels of knowledge and skill sets. So, how do you find yourself leading those teams and and share a little bit what's worked well for you and what maybe hasn't?
Yeah, that question is very applicable to my career. And just to kind of give you and the audience a little bit of perspective, when I left college, I went straight to KPMG during the Sarbanes-Oxley days, and really didn't know what that work was going to be. But I did that for 2.5 years or so, and then I did not really enjoy the work that we were doing. KPMG was fine as a company, I just didn't like the work. And so my first role that I jumped out was to go to a company called Cox Enterprise based in Atlanta here, and was still doing Sarbanes-Oxley work, but I just needed that as my next step in my career. And eventually, while working at Cox, I found myself moving into a completely different role, which was project management of business intelligence. And at that point, I was about 7 years into my career, and I had never done project management, nor had I ever done business intelligence. And the role was within the IT department, so it was the first time I'd ever been in an IT department. So it was all new. There wasn't really like, oh, I know what I'm doing. It was very much a get in and kind of figure it out as I went. Um, and I will say the question you're asking was very, call it anxiety causing to some extent at that time, because I was leading extremely intelligent people, doing very challenging technical work. And when I first got in, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what they're talking about. And I'm in charge. And in charge is actually really a misnomer, because I clearly was not in charge. I turned I turned the mindset of project manager from being in charge to I'm the facilitator. I am here to help you guys get the job done, whatever that takes. So whatever roadblocks need to be unblocked, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to try to keep us on task. But honestly, very especially when I first started, when it was like keeping them on task and knowing the task, what that entailed, I had no idea. Um, but I will say one thing that I learned and also kind of just decided very early on is I'm not going to pretend like I know, because I think that's going to make the anxiety worse. I'm not going to go in and say, "Oh, I know exactly how to build an ETL and you need to this should take 3 days and you're telling me it's going to take 20?" That's crazy. I wasn't going to be that guy. Instead, I took the perspective of, "Hey, I'm just going to be open and honest with these guys." And I say guys, it was men and women on our teams. And there were several times where I would get completely lost in the conversation and I would just type furiously, take notes, and be like, I'm going to come back later. And what I started doing is I would pick out people who seemed to really understand the concept. And I would say, Hey, Anitha, or hey, John, can you stay with me for like 10 minutes after this meeting? I just want to run through my notes and one, make sure that I captured it correctly, because I didn't know what y'all were talking about. But two, also ask some questions. And I remember actually one guy named Hector who was very helpful, who I was working on a project called Exadata, which is an Oracle engineered appliance. We were building out this appliance, and I was responsible for the installation and everything involved with installing it. And I had been in this meeting for like an hour and a half with like 10 of the most technical people I'd ever met in my life. And I pulled Hector aside after the meeting. I was like, could you just hang out with me for a little bit? Because I'm totally lost. And Hector was fantastic. And I was like, hey, pretend I don't know what I'm talking about. Now, my degree was management of information systems. But at this point, we're 7 years past college. I haven't been doing any of this stuff. I've never been in IT operations. So he explained to me what a node was, what a server was. I mean, everybody knows what a server is, but when you start getting very nitty gritty, they're talking about clustering of the servers and what nodes look like and what they physically look like. And I was like, okay, so when you say this and this and this, that's what this looks like. And so I took that and just kind of started building up my vocabulary and learning as I went. And I will say that I think for the people that I asked questions to, I was initially scared that they were going to judge me and be like, why this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And actually, what I learned is it actually kind of earned their respect, in that they didn't have management coming in and telling them what to do. It was more of the project manager wanted to learn and wanted to kind of understand what they were doing and not just dictate timelines to them. So I learned a ton from that team. And then
Yep.
that's kind of where I started. And from that
Yep.
point forward, I've just been learning and learning and learning.
Yeah.
And
And in our industry, in our field, learning is never something that stops, right?
no, and
As
it
we all
can't.
know, it can't. Whether, like you said, whether we like it or not. And I'm not just agreeing with you for the sake of agreeing, but that is literally my style as well. I absolutely love working with teams and in areas that I know nothing about, selfishly, because I love learning.
Hmm.
And I also to your point, do not pretend. Um, and the other thing that you spoke of that I want to bring to light again is whether you're a leader, a director, manager, or a project manager, when you're working with resources that know their thing, right, or know their area of expertise, the subject matter expert, it's very valuable and very authentic and very respectful when we hear what they share in response to timeline and tasks. And when you hear them and really embed what they're sharing into your planning and deliverables, you are building that culture of trust,
Hmm.
and they actually bend over backwards to get it done for you.
Yeah.
I think at least that's how it's worked for me, and they're challenging themselves. Oh, I'll try to get that done sooner, And I'm always trying to say, okay, now, well, let's not overcommit. But they
Hmm.
do. They try to make the project successful. So speaking of authenticity, how do you build trust? And so you've touched on this a little bit already, but continue the conversation on building the trust and credibility with your team while you're staying in your lane, right? And you're trying to remove barriers and remove constraints for them. So
Hmm.
build upon that. Continue that conversation, please.
Yeah, and I probably should have said this before my first answer, which is I can just talk all day long, and so I might go really deep on some of these questions. If
That's all
if
right.
if you want to cut me off, or if you want to ask a follow-up question, feel free
Yeah,
to
yeah.
just throw a flag on the field.
Okay.
But yeah, to kind of go back to building trust, I think it all starts with just kind of being honest and genuine about who you are and what you are. And I've seen some cultures where I felt I was very intimidated, and I was intimidated, and I almost kind of felt stupid a lot of times because people would be talking about things that I don't understand. And earlier in my career, I just assumed that was a me problem. And what I've kind of concluded, or at least in my middle career where I am now, most of the time, if somebody's talking about something and I don't understand it, I've kind of concluded that's almost always a them problem. And what I mean by that is all of us are experts at what we do. That's all well and good, but if you can't communicate what you do or the impacts of what you do to people who are impacted by what you do, then you're not going to be super effective. Um,
Just for the record, I really love how you said that.
well,
That
thank you.
was really well said. And I think in our industry, we often we have these words, right, like downtime communication
Oh
or
yeah,
impact, and they're all important points. But the means in which we communicate and articulate that was well summarized by what you just said.
thank you. And another thing, we IT corporate whatever, we use acronyms left and right, and I think that the really most effective communicators, uh, it's okay to use acronyms as long as that matches your audience's expectations. But the really effective communicators will watch and be like, you know what, I used a ABC XYZ acronym there. Let me take a step back and be like, hey, John, are you familiar with the concept of ABC and what it actually means? And give them the opportunity to be like, you know what? I didn't understand that, but I didn't want to raise my hand and be the only one in the room who doesn't. But thank you for explaining that to me and making sure that I'm caught up, and you don't leave somebody behind on the conversation, because
Right.
my theory is if you're gonna if somebody's important enough to be in the meeting, they need to kind of understand what's going on and not just leave them behind. They're not there for just one thing.
Yeah.
um, I kind of went off the rails, but your question was about building trust, and like I said, it goes
See,
back.
I already forgot what the. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
But yeah, I mean, you try to be as honest and genuine
Yeah.
in the workplace about what you know, what you don't know, and I whenever I'm working with really anybody for that matter. I just kind of assume they probably know more than me about whatever that they're working on. And rather than me ever telling them what to do or dictating, you need to do X, Y, and Z, I typically start with questions like, hey, tell me about that project you're working on. How does that work? And what are the impacts and that kind of thing? And I would say that is kind of in line with one of Covey's principles of seek first to understand before you start talking. And I try to be like, all right, well, I don't really know what you're doing. Or sometimes I'll say, I don't even know what you just said something crazy. Help me understand what that means.
Yeah.
And then I'll try to take that and understand the impact and then put that together with the overall impact of the entire project. Um, and I'm a huge fan of just, you know what? Let's draw a picture. Like, let's not get all wrapped around with all the different words. Like, let's get the whiteboard out. One of my favorite coworkers from my days at Cox was Gail, and she was super smart, super technical. And she'd come in, she'd be like, "Oh, we got this problem, this problem, this problem." I'm like, "Let's take a step back.
Yeah.
Draw me a picture on the
Yeah.
whiteboard. Give me the where are the points, where are the hard things, and where does, the person who has a problem, where do they come into this? Okay. And then once I understood the picture, I'm like, okay, now that I understand the problem and where it's coming from, let's talk about what do we think is the best next solution. And I think for Gail in that particular situation, a lot of times she just wanted to be heard. Be like, listen,
Yeah.
I'm frustrated with these
Yeah.
customers, these peer organizations that are,
Yeah.
not respecting our timelines, or maybe they're, what I would see a lot of time is we'd have a timeline, and our timelines, we got to get our job done in a week, but it's based on getting the input a week ago. Well, you can't come to us today on our deadline and give us your input and say, well, you got to turn this around. Well, hang on. Our timeline was you give us the requirements or the input a week ago. We have a week to work on it. If you're going to give it to us today, you can't expect us to deliver it today. And
Yeah.
she would help me understand what has happened. And then, my role would be to go talk to the people kind of upstream of us and like, "Listen, we can't meet this deadline. And it's not Gail's fault. Gail's
Yeah.
doing her job. And let me kind of defend the position of Gail and be like, hey, Gail still needs a week to do this work starting today, not a week ago, because you didn't give
Yeah.
it to us until today."
You know, I think for you, this behavior and reaction and how you interact with people and your team and your colleagues, I think is very natural for you because it's who you are. But with this, you are inadvertently and naturally building this culture around you.
Hmm.
And with that, people will lower their guard
Hmm.
and they relax. So you're building that culture that we try to teach leaders, but you
Yeah,
you are kind of doing it naturally. And uh, you shared a little bit about that, how you react to your team talking to you, how you inquire and try to support them. So now I'm going off the rails myself and asking you something I didn't tell you I was
sure.
going to kind of ask about. But how do you kind of manage and kind of bridge the gap when maybe um, two of your team members doesn't have to be direct reports, but on a project or whatever, you got two people with different skill sets or maybe even the same, but they're not aligned
Hmm.
on whether it's the technical component or even maybe um, how they're addressing the challenges at hand. If I may be more generic, how do you kind of bridge that or bring that together?
That's a good question, and it happens occasionally.
Hmm.
I would say, luckily, our team is really effective in all ways, and therefore the example you're asking about happens fairly rarely
Hmm.
amongst our team. But it could happen where one of our team members might have a situation where it seems like they have a totally different perspective than somebody outside of our team. And so when that happens and we need to make progress, the way that I'll typically approach that is I'll talk to each side of the party individually by themselves. And the reason is I want to get their full perspective and their full story without the potential emotion of having somebody that's in the room contradicting them while they're trying to tell their story. And uh, kind of go back to the whiteboard example. A lot of times I'll be like, all right, well, help me understand what's going on. Let's draw it on a whiteboard. And then I'll go have the same conversation with the other person and not even say, well, the other guy said this. It's more of like, help me understand your perspective. And then, sometimes you may find out they're actually saying the same thing using different words. That's fairly frequent,
Yeah,
but also fairly easy to resolve. You just
sure.
kind of get somebody, once you can have kind of like a neutral arbiter in that
Mhm.
situation, you can come in and say, okay, well, John, when you say red, and the other guy, when you say crimson, it kind of means the same thing. And you're getting maybe hung up on the vernacular rather than the overall concept of what we're trying to
Yeah,
do. Um, but then if they are truly having contradictory perspectives, I'll be like, well, why does your perspective make sense? And why is this the right way to go? And try to understand the root cause and
mhm,
do that for both. And then once I feel like I understand both perspectives, now typically at this point, I may not understand the technology. Like
right,
I'm not going to have the opportunity to dig into the code and actually understand
sure,
how everything's going, but at least understand the concepts of what they're shooting for.
yeah,
Then I'll pull them together and be like, guys, there's not a wrong or right. We've just got to figure out the way. And here's what I understand from you, and here's what I understand from you. Based on what I just explained, did what I understand from you, is that what you heard? Like, and try to go back and forth and make sure, are we speaking
yeah,
the same language?
sure,
And typically, if you can kind of set the culture or the tone of the meeting, that it's like, it's not trying to get you're right and you're wrong and vice versa. It's like, let's just find a solution that works for all of us. And there is no consequences. Nobody's going to get
sure,
punished or
right,
dinged for being wrong. We're just trying to
sure,
figure out what the best solution is. What I've seen, specifically in Piedmont, is the culture is typically people want to get on the same page. We all are kind of, I've been amazed with the culture at this organization that we're
yeah,
all moving towards the same goal, which is to deliver higher quality care to our patients. If if you ever have any kind of conflict, and you can see, well, one side is not about quality care and the other side is about quality care, that's going to be the trump card. We're like, listen, we're going to do what's right for the patient,
right, yeah,
so
and
let's
and I
do
was
that.
gonna say that too. When every time there's um, not a common understanding of how we're going to get somewhere. Even the how, often when we bring it back to quality of care, because I love your background, how you've had some of that corporate background as well. I've only worked in the bricks and mortars of a hospital
Mm.
my whole life, even when I was in the army. And my
Where the
go-to
real work
always
gets done.
with that.
Sorry, I totally derailed you, but I was going to say, what you just described, where you've worked, is where the real work gets done, right? So everything that our team does is to enable the people who are patient facing. They're
Right.
on the ground level, and
Yeah.
if we ever lose sight of that,
Yeah.
we're doing the wrong job. So our
Right.
work needs to
Agree.
only support you guys and
Yeah. No.
and the people that you're
And
supporting at your
exactly.
location.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. Again, going back to whatever that understanding or that translation is, when we bring back to the quality of patient care and its impact to our patients and community, often people find ways to realign. And then obviously there's conversations about resources and finance, all that too, but quality does center us. Um, so you talked about the exception a little bit there in the approach, but also turning this not not just into a culture but a habit, right?
hmm,
So collaboration always it's a great word, and obviously it's important, but it's not. We get lost in our day-to-day lives and day-to-day
hmm,
practice, and we're trying to get things done. So, what day-to-day habits, rituals, or behaviors um, do you believe that either you demonstrate or really try to bring light to your team that will truly bring that culture of collaboration
hmm.
into their, you know, how they behave in your team meetings or even maybe with their customers?
Sure. Yeah. So the, there's kind of two cultural themes on our team that I really like to emphasize. One is
Mhm.
collaboration, the other is innovation, and they kind of overlap a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and let me start with just saying that I want to give the credit to my leader, my boss is Mark Jackson. He's our vice president and chief
Yeah.
data officer for Piedmont Healthcare. He really established the culture that I stepped into about 5 years ago. And all I can say is I've just taken that and said, this is awesome. Let's just keep, let's double
Mhm.
down on,
Yeah.
collaboration and innovation. So just to give you a couple of examples of how we keep those top of mind. We do follow an agile methodology, and specifically, we work in 2 week sprints.
Oh,
And if for anybody in the audience who's not familiar with the methodology, I'm not going to go into detail, but basically, one of the key facets of agile is that you work in sprints, which means I'm only going to, or we as a team are only committing to our deliverables that we have accepted for the next 2 weeks in what's called a sprint. So you basically work in these 2 week cycles. And outside of our project delivery responsibilities, we have certain ceremonies or meetings or whatever you want to call them that are on our schedule for every sprint. So one thing that we do, we've labeled it with a cute acronym called flight time, but regardless of what the acronym stands for, every member on our team is allocated 4 hours of every sprint. So basically 4 hours out of an 80-hour period on a Friday morning where they have nothing on their calendar and they are not expected to be working on project-based deliverables. And basically we call that self-driven learning. And that time is really free time. Now we expect them to be working online doing whatever they need to do, but they could learn whatever they want. Ideally, it needs to be something that the rest of the team could benefit from. So if you want to work on your technical skills and maybe do a deep dive on complex SQL, which is the
wow.
primary language we use, that's
So you guys
fantastic.
are promoting ongoing workforce development, and that's embedded in your culture.
Yes,
Wow, that's
with
awesome.
protected time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, amazing.
So you could work on Python, SQL, you could
Yeah.
work on your presentation skills, you could work on
Mhm,
Excel, you could work on anything in we use the Atlassian suite with Confluence for how we document everything or
mhm,
anything in Tableau. Um,
mhm,
really anything that could add value to either your skill set or the team. So that
mhm,
happens every sprint. On the opposing weeks of every sprint, we have a meeting called the BI team learning meeting, and it is the only meeting that we have on a recurring basis where we get the entire BI team together, which is 46 team members. And we get together. Now we're almost all remote, so it's online on a WebEx forum.
mhm,
But I try to explain it. It's kind of like a staff meeting in reverse.
mhm,
And if you think about a traditional staff meeting in corporate America or maybe IT, you
mhm.
probably picture you get everybody in a room and then whoever the leader is gets up and that person talks at the team for an hour. We got to do this. We're going to do this. This is what's next. Any questions? Okay, ready, go. We reverse that. The agenda for our team learning meeting is blank, and I put it out as a blank template. I created that's part of my responsibilities, but then I'll say, "Hey team, put your stuff on the agenda." And what we expect from our team members is to take the lessons that they've learned either in their self-learning time or just
Mhm,
on the job
mhm,
and put a topic out there. Hey, I did a deep dive on Python. I learned this new skill that I in Python. There was a new function. I built a new function. Maybe I built a function that we could all use. And here's how it works. And here's the use case where you could use it in your day to day. Fantastic. Here's a Tableau dashboard that I built. A new trick that I learned. I'll show them even some relatively non-technical things that I learned that made me more efficient in documentation of project stuff.
Does this ever turn into agendas that are gripe sessions or that are not focused on the concept that you're sharing?
I'm going to say no. My short answer is
Okay.
no, not really.
Okay. Well,
We
that's
do
good.
actually, we've actually had. I'm going to kind of derail from my answer, but
Uh-huh.
when we've had some of those things come up where it is almost a gripe session, and when we kind of as a leadership team say, you know what, that seemed to touch a chord with the team, like there's something going on there, we'll set up a separate meeting.
Okay. So you
And I
table
think,
it
yeah,
and
we'll
then
call that a
address.
listening meeting.
Oh,
We've done
okay,
that
okay.
a lot of times recently where we'll have what we call a listening meeting. And it's really meant to be around a topic or a theme of something that we're sensing. And that's one of the ways that we try to just connect with our team members as humans. Sometimes that listening meeting can be about a work topic. A lot of times it's not. Sometimes, we had a listening session a month or two ago, and we actually ended up having two of them because we went over. We had an hour for each time, and some of our team members were feeling the political implication or the stress of the political things happening with immigration or the things that are happening in the political sphere. And the purpose of that meeting was not to say, well, the left side's right or the right side's right. It was more of, hey, let's talk about how this is impacting you guys as
Yeah,
people, as humans.
right, right. You do a lot of listening. I want to bring that to light, and I'm not in any way being facetious. As a leader, whether you're building that culture, whether you're in a situation where you don't know the details, and but you're still trying to lead or manage, or if it's like you said in team meetings, you're listening. It
Hmm.
seems so basic, but I want to really bring that to light because you're hearing and listening and reacting in a what do you call a foundational way to your team, and inadvertently again you're building that culture so that your team members hopefully also behave in that fashion and listen to each other when there's a need for them to work through something amongst themselves as back to that team culture.
I agree. I don't know if there was a question there, but yeah, I
No,
try to
no
listen.
question. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm
um,
just saying, I think that's very important because
mm,
again, you and I, we are very people person, right? We talk a
mhm.
lot, and to your point, we can
Extroverted.
keep, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can keep talking, but you pause to listen to your people with purpose, with intent, so that you can pick up on what is needed. So whether you're having your um, pinpointed, targeted listening meetings or whatever you do with that,
Mhm.
you can be there to continuously support your team, is what I'm taking away from this conversation.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. I will say I want to try. I want to mostly agree with you, but I also say that's something that I'm continuously working on.
Yeah.
Is trying to listen before talking. If you ask my team members, not a single one of them would say I'm shy or quiet. I'm very open and I will share my perspective.
Sure.
But there are definitely times where I try to be intentionally quiet or slow to speak
Hmm.
because I can sometimes draw out different perspectives from team
Hmm.
members who would maybe team members who are a little bit more on the introverted side who may have a lot of value to add, but they're not going to voluntarily like, hey, here's my thoughts and here's how this is valuable.
Right.
Sometimes
Yeah.
that you'll have a situation where you're like,
Yeah.
hey, John Doe, you're kind of being quiet. I'd really
Hmm.
like to get your perspective on this
Hmm.
before we make a decision.
Hmm.
And I will say one of the things that I try to do on a regular basis, for example, when we're hiring somebody, when
Hmm.
we interview somebody, I always speak last. And the reason is I may have an opinion about the candidate, but I feel like if I say that opinion first and
Right.
somebody may have a dissenting opinion, they may be like, well, the director's already spoken and
Yeah.
I don't
Or
need to
Russ has
contradict.
already made up his mind.
Right.
Yeah.
I really I try to do it intentionally. Like I want all of the team
Hmm.
members to give their perspectives first. Now, if they have contradicting opinions, I'll like double click into that. All right, well,
Yeah.
John, you said this. Anita, you
Yeah.
said this. You know, what are you guys thinking about that?
Sure.
And then I will at the end share. Okay, based here's my thoughts. Here's what I observed from the candidate. Here's what I heard from all of you guys, and here's what I'm thinking. Do we have a
Yeah.
consensus?
Yeah.
And in a perfect world, when we're hiring somebody, we're always going to have a consensus. That's not
Sure.
how it works. Sometimes
Yeah.
we may get down to where we have maybe two candidates who are kind of equally voted. Like half the team wants this person, half this team
Hmm.
wants this one. But in that situation, I'm going to make sure that of the last two candidates, we don't have anybody that somebody has a major concern with. Like if there's a significant concern, we're going to definitely spend time as a group talking about that concern
Sure.
and wrestle that to the ground before we make a decision. But
Yeah.
then ultimately, it's going to be it is my responsibility as a leader to make the decision, but I want to make sure that our team members who are contributing their input, make sure they understand that their input is highly valued. It
Sure.
is not just me making an executive decision and I don't care what y'all say. I like
Yeah.
no,
No.
you're here
No.
because we need your opinion.
Right, right, right. And they all bring value with that background and experience that they bring to the table. And so we've touched on collaboration and culture, and you alluded to this just a second ago, but innovation. And we know that innovation is hard
Hmm.
with limited resources, right? If
Hmm.
we had unlimited resources, whether it was the human side or the technical side or the funding, but obviously, especially in healthcare, we do not have unlimited funding
Hmm.
or resources. So, how does you and your team keep innovation at the forefront, alive with what we all know that we deal with today?
Yeah. So I'll kind of reference back to some of the things that I was explaining earlier about just the things that we do on a regular basis to inspire or encourage innovation.
Well,
Um,
I'm sorry, you are so right. Like the sprint and that methodology, I absolutely love and value that. I was very much impressed having a PMO background, having that embedded in your workflow. That is already an example. You're right.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think our team members appreciate that. I think it's actually one of our better retention strategies is that people get to enjoy learning on the job. But with that in mind, kind of what I'm thinking here is that with the limited resources, you kind of have to bake it into this is the structure of the job, and that only works. Let me take a step back. When I say bake it into the structure of the job, like, hey, when we're requesting headcount, understand that we're going to manage this headcount in that we're going to specifically allocate time for innovation that is not project delivery. That's what we're going to get from this headcount when we are adding a position. Now, that only works if you deliver on your expectations. So if we hire people and we allocate all this time to innovation and then we fail to deliver on our assigned projects, I guarantee you somebody in finance is going to identify that and be like, hey, we're not going to give you more headcount if you're not going to be productive with it. So it's a delicate balance there, right? We want to make sure that we are assigning time for our people to learn and to collaborate, share what they've learned with the rest of the team, but at the same time, always keeping us driving toward the project objectives. And I'll just say this is just an
Good point.
agile methodology is not something it's not mine. It's a
You're
you
right.
know industry wide, but I
Right.
think it definitely uh, is easier to create that culture and of allocation of time for innovation in an agile methodology as opposed to the waterfall approach where you got to hit the deadline. Doesn't matter what you got to do, we got to hit that deadline. Like, okay, well, agile methodology allows you to kind of have a conversation of yes, we have a deadline or we have a target date, but let's talk about the priorities of the organization and what's most important. It's a lot of times deadlines are somewhat arbitrary and there's no like impact of truly missing them. But in agile methodology, you consider the priorities of the organization, and sometimes it might be worth it to bump a target date if we're going to be adding more value. That's kind of taken us down a whole other
Yeah.
road of
Yeah.
agile methodology and that manifesto, which I could talk
But
all day long about.
but there's a level of discipline part of
Yes.
that, right? As you said, delicate balance and discipline. And I think when you have that culture, that commitment of how you balance that and even how you scope initiatives and expectations, the team is invested.
Hmm.
and making it successful because they see the value add to the team, value add to themselves. And you, again, you are setting that foundation for workforce development, for your retention, and continuing to bring balance and value to the organization. That is absolutely amazing and not always the case everywhere. And this is, because not because anyone is trying not to do it, but they might not have that perspective that you're
Hmm.
bringing to it. So, um, Russ, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I've learned more about you as well, kind of your start in your career, a lot of things I didn't know. Thank you for your willingness to share that. And as we close, and something that I'm really starting to appreciate and like to do is taking a moment and having our listeners learn a little bit more about you, Russ. I would love for you to take a moment and share with our audience and listeners what's next for you. And it could be personal, professional, but we want to learn a little bit what is next on the docket for you. And as we're closing the year out, maybe it's a New Year's resolution thing.
Yeah. What's top of mind right
Hmm.
now is
Hmm.
what my wife told me about this morning. And before I tell you what that is, I'm going to kind of give you some background about me. So, married almost 20 years,
Okay.
and we have 4 kids and
Okay.
a dog. We live that suburb life, you know. My wife is incredibly intelligent, and she had a very successful career before we had children,
Hmm.
with Delta Airlines.
Okay.
And then when we had our first kid back in 2008, she actually retired from Delta. And in the meantime, while raising children and running the HOA and volunteering with the kids and being the team mom for cheerleading and all the
Yeah.
other things that she does, she actually
Yeah.
picked up a part time job in 2013 that she did from home and has done that all this time. But just in the last month,
Hmm.
she got a very special opportunity to go back to Delta Airlines.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
that's the context of what I'm about to tell you. So this
Yeah.
morning we were going to my kids' Thanksgiving celebration at school, and she's like, "So about next week, we're gonna go to New York City and do all these things." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" Um, So I learned this morning that she's cooking up a plan for us to make use of her flight benefits and fly to New York on the day after Thanksgiving,
Oh, wow.
and with all 4 kids, and we're
You're
going
brave.
to. We are brave. She is brave. Um, Sometimes I feel like I'm along for the ride with the bravery world, but yeah, she can handle all that stuff. But she wants to show them all the cool things in Central Park
Oh,
and do some ice
beautiful.
skating and
Oh,
uh,
good. It's the
what
right
is it?
season to
FAA
be there.
Schwartz? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
See that
Yeah.
she wants to see the holiday things, and
Yeah.
so we're
Yeah.
going to try to do that in a day trip, meaning we'd fly
Okay.
up in the morning and fly back in the evening.
Oh my God. Now, it was back in 2000. That's right, 2000. My oldest son was still an infant. We did a overnight trip from Tennessee to Canada and back.
Wow.
Only because I
Flying,
wanted to go.
right?
We flew, yes.
Okay, okay.
Me and my husband, because I wanted to go see WrestleMania. You know, I like wrestling.
I did
So,
not know this about you. You're a
yes,
WWE fan.
I am. Oh, yes. But literally, we went to Canada one night. We did not even leave the hotel. We went to the hotel, to the venue, to the hotel, to the airport. My husband goes, the amount of money we spent, we didn't even get to see Canada.
This
But
is
so, okay.
Toronto, or where'd y'all go?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Toronto, okay.
Yeah. So back to you. So you're gonna go to New York with the family, with 4 kids for one day.
For yeah, best I can think, we'll probably land around 9:30 a.m. and we'll probably take off to come back home maybe 9:30 p.m. So maybe 12
Wow.
hours on the ground. And this is kind of the way that we roll with traveling.
Okay.
Like Kathy will just make a plan, and the
Okay.
plan is very softly defined, and
Okay.
it's a lot of it is kind of figured out as you go. And I have learned, I'm a planner, project manager. I have learned that when we're on these trips, I just kind of
You
turn
gotta
over the
let it go.
keys to
You
her.
gotta let it go. Yeah, yeah.
You know what?
Enjoy it.
It's all going to work out. We're going to end
Enjoy it.
up,
Yeah.
eventually, we'll be back home in our own beds. And
Yep,
in
yep.
between, we're just having fun.
Yeah, well, that is wonderful. I wish you guys nothing but an enjoyable time. Enjoy the family, the kids, take a lot of pictures. I did go. Oh, I did go to New York this past summer with the boys, and again, it was for wrestling. We went to Fanatics Fest. We went to Fanatics Fest, but we did stay there for a couple days to enjoy New York, and they made me do the subway. So I don't know
Okay.
if you have time to do the subway. You will enjoy it. It was a wonderful experience. Russ, my friend, thank you again for joining me and having a little bit of a conversation with me. And we will have to read. We have to do this again, and we'll
Sure.
figure out another wonderful topic that we can bring to our listeners. Again, thank you, Russ, and I hope you have a wonderful time there.
Thank you.